That was weird. Okay, here we are. We just finished up the line work. We need to start creating our text. So I'm going to zoom in a little here. And I'm going to click on this drop down. I don't want to create multi-line text yet. I'm going to click down and say single line text. Now this is normal behavior. You're creating an annotative object. Let me back up. I want to show this to you. Creating an annotative object, set the annotation scale to the scale you want the annotation intended to display. Well, we're going to use 1:1. That's full scale. We'll get into these a little bit as we're laying out what scale we want our apartment floor plans to display and plot at. That's going to be the next thing. That's the next assignment, and we're not quite there yet. But for right now, 1:1, we can leave it there, and it's all good. But when we created, we'll leave it here. I'll get to that in a second. But all these settings are tied together with what we had set up in our text styles. Now, at this point, if your text styles were created incorrectly in your template, they're going to begin showing up now. Oop, and I got one thing out of order. I'm going to cancel out of this. I'm going to change my active layer. I don't want to use the title block layer. I want Titleblock Text. Well, since we already used that annotative setting, we already set that up. I'm going to go here for Style, and we want to make sure it was on page 4b of the handout that our text styles here are properly displayed or properly configured. So Arial, the text style Arial is using the Arial font, is using the regular variant of the Arial font because I can use bold, italic, and all that. I want it to be annotative. That's what that 1:1, that dialogue that came up, that's what that's being referred to. And I want a paper text height of 3/32. And I want annotative and text height of 3/32 available everywhere. So Arial bold, using the font name Arial. It's using the bold variant of the Arial font, and we're still annotative and a paper text height of 3/32. We have Arial narrow, which is using the font Arial narrow. If you don't have the Arial narrow font, you set this value to Arial and you set the width factor to 0.75. It's effectively the same thing. The regular variant of the Arial font, we want an annotative of 3/32. The standard, I don't use the standard text style for anything. It's just me. It's a quirk. I don't like it because standard means what? Who's standard, right? It's a little, for me, it's just a little nebulous. But to make sure that I don't use it, I'm going to make it something really ugly like this txt.shx, and it's an old school vector font. It's not a Windows font. It's an AutoCAD font, and it looks that nasty. It's really pretty bad. Annotative is unchecked. If it's checked and this is set to 3/32, it's not a big deal. I've got mine selected as not annotative and a height of 0. It's just one more thing. If I accidentally create text on using the text style of standard, one of the first things it's going to ask me is how big do you want the text? What size do you want this text? And it's going to look different and act different than the annotative setting that we had a minute ago. And that's just a reinforcement that, hey, I'm using the wrong thing. And then we have a text style called Times. It's using the font name Times New Roman. It's the normal variant. We want it annotated with a text height of 3/32. So come back over here. Arial, my current text style is Arial. If this is not Arial right here, select Arial, and then come over here and click on Select Current, and I'm done, and we'll click Close. So now we're actually, super quick recap of that. We wanted to show what this text looks like. So come back up here, use the drop down. I want single line text, and I'm just going to click somewhere. It doesn't really matter where. I'm going to click somewhere. So left click. What angle do I want my text? Technically, this is the last value that you entered when you're creating text. I haven't created any text in this drawing, so it's using the default angle of 0. I can use my crosshairs. I can left click anywhere if I wanted to. I could key in 45 degrees if I wanted to, but I don't want to do that. I actually want to use 0 degrees. And now I'm ready to start creating text. And the first thing that we type in, project to date. I'm going to click return, and I'm going to type in, Well, the project due date, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, is 10/10/2017. And I'm done with this, so I'm going to push return. Now, AutoCAD is assuming I want to enter another line of text. This is just a fun little thing about the text command. If I'm done with my single line text and I don't want to create any more text, I will push return again. And this is what's called single line text. So each line of text is its own AutoCAD object. And I did that specifically because if you look at the handout, the text is two different sizes. So I need to modify, I need to change those now. So I highlight the top item of text, I go to my properties palette, expand that, come down. Annotative is fine, I'm not changing that. I'm coming to my paper text height. Instead of 3/32, I'm entering 1/16. And as you can see, boom, there it goes. Zoom in a little so I can see what's going on. Wow, that scroll wheel is sensitive. I'm using a new mouse right now, so I'm not quite used to it. Excuse me. So now I'm going to highlight. I'm going to highlight the bottom text. Come back out to my properties palette, and the paper text height for this is going to be 1/8. There we go. It's exactly what I wanted to do. Now, I'm going to move these into place, and they're going to go in two slightly different places. And it'll make sense when you see me do it, but we're going to have to do this in two different ways. So I'm going to start with my move command. Now, there is an imaginary boundary box around the text that will allow you to left-click on that imaginary box and still snap to the insertion point. Now, if you don't see insertion anywhere, well, that's not the one I wanted. Make it go away. There we go. Now, if you notice, I have my mouse right over the text itself. It's not gonna give me the option to make the snap. I have to mouse over that imaginary box around the perimeter, and it doesn't matter if it's the top one or the bottom one. It doesn't matter if it's the beginning or the end, but there is that imaginary box there that runs around the text. If you're not seeing that, then you'll want to come down to this little guy right here, right-click, and make sure that insertion is checked, because that's what we're connecting to right now. That's what we're snapping to, is the insertion point of that piece of text. So I'll hold my mouse until I see the insertion point, the snap show up. I'm going to get closer and closer to it, and I'm going to try and mouse right on top of it. There we go. And then when I hold my mouse over it and hover right there, now I'm getting this object track to show up. This is exactly what I want to have happen. So I'm going to move my mouse out to the left. I'm going to remain on that horizontal tracking lock, and I'm going to type in 5/32, 5/32. I'm going to begin my base point. My base point is actually going to be 5/32 to the left of the insertion point of that piece of text. That's what I'm telling it. Push return. There we go. Now it works like any other move command. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to hold my mouse over the endpoint here. I'm not left clicking yet. Hold my mouse over the endpoint of that line, and I'm going to move that mouse, move my mouse up. Doesn't matter how much, because I'm going to type in a value that I want this to be above. And it's going to be 3/32. Return. There it is. That is exactly where I wanted to move that piece of text. Now I'm going to do the same thing, or something, I should say, I'm going to do something similar with this piece of text. I'm going to move. And I hold that mouse around so I can see my snap point. And remember, it's that imaginary box. I cannot click directly on the text, because it won't engage the snap point. So there's that imaginary box. Move my mouse so that I'm hovering over, and my tracking should show up. There it is. There's my tracking. You can tell I have not left clicked yet. Move my mouse to the left and type in 5/32. Make sure that I'm still on axis. Press return. And now I'm going to come to the endpoint of this line, and I'm going to come down. In this case, I'm coming down 3/16 of an inch. There we go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy these. CO for copy. I'm going to select both the bottom. Well, I'll just do the bottom this time. We'll do the text, the top one in a different. No, we'll do them both the same. Select both of them. Left click. I'm done selecting my objects. Press return. Now, to specify a base point, I actually want to start copying right at this midpoint. So I can left click on that midpoint. That's the point that I'm moving from or copying from. I'm going to drag down until I find snap on this midpoint. Now, if I hover, or if I don't hover, I don't have to have my mouse, my crosshairs on that midpoint to snap to that midpoint. As long as that triangle shows up, as long as that little tooltip shows up that says, hey, this is the midpoint. If you click here, it's going to be the midpoint of that line that you're selecting. That's what AutoCAD is telling me. So I left click right here, and I'm instantly copied that item right there. And I'm going to copy it again. So another left click, because the copy command continues until you push return until AutoCAD you're done. I'm going to left click again right here. Now I'm done copying right now, so I'm going to push return, but I'm going to copy again because I need to copy just this top piece of text down into the next two boxes. So CO for copy. I'm going to click just this top piece of text, push return because I'm done selecting my objects. The base point is going to be the midpoint of the line immediately above that piece of text. Left click, move down. I'm going to copy to that midpoint. Even though the live update shows that this text is overlapping the line, my tooltip says midpoint, and I'm getting the little green triangle that tells me if I left click now, it's actually going to accept the click value as if I were sitting right dead on that midpoint. So left click and left click again. I'm done copying, I push return. Well, obviously we don't want to have the same value for every line of this text. That's kind of a given. So how do we change it? Easiest way to edit text in AutoCAD is double click on it. So project due date, we're going to change to read project description. There we go. The next title down should read drawn by. And then the next title down is going to be checked by. And then this next title down, when you're done selecting, I didn't say this, but by watching, I hope it makes sense. When you're done selecting or editing your text, you can just either push return or you can left click out into outer space. I'll be a little more explicit when we change this one. I'm going to change this one to read sheet title. Now at this point I can either press return, or if I just left click out here in outer space, it's accepted that. If I click escape on the keyboard, if I press the escape key, it will cancel the edit, so I don't want to use that. And this last one here, instead of project due date, should read drawing number, or the abbreviation for number. Drawing no. If you want to say number, how did I spell that correctly? That's embarrassing. Drawing number, you can do that too. That's fine. Okay, so I'm done editing this text. I'm going to push return. I'm going to pan over here. I'm going to put some multiline text in now. So if I use this drop down, I want multiline text. Now, I'm going to create it over here. I'm going to create it over here just in outer space because we're going to go through that those same move commands again, but I also want to make some additional modifications. It's going to be a little easier to do that if we're not trying to be quite so precise. This is where being a little sloppy in advance and then moving the objects where you want them is going to be a little easier to deal with. So I'm just going to left click, and I'm going to make this more or less the same size as this adjacent box is over here. So the text is going to be more or less about that big, and that's fine. So now my ribbon tools up here are all going to change as soon as my AutoCAD catches up. There we go. And now I'm going to begin typing. Well, actually, I'm not going to type. I'm going to create a field. Think of field as magical text. Some of it may not make complete sense now, but when you see it in action, it's going to make a little more sense. So under field category, I'm going to change this to document. I want file name. I'm going to use the format where everything is in uppercase. I want the file name only, and I do not want to display the file extension. And then I click OK. So because the name of my file is UNT Titleblock, that's the value that's being reported. And again, you're thinking, well, why is this handy? I don't want every sheet that I make to have the name of UNT Titleblock. Well, when we use this drawing as a title block in other drawings, then this value will read the sheet name of that file. It'll make sense when you see it. It's a little hard to explain. So I'm done with this. I'm going to click Close Text Editor. And I'm going to copy this piece of M text. And I'm just going to copy it down here a ways. It really doesn't matter where. Again, I'm putting it out in outer space. I'm going to highlight my top one, go to my properties. This needs to be a paper height of 1/8 of an inch. Push return. There we go. I'm going to select my bottom one. I'm going to come over here to properties, and we're going to change what style we're using. So instead of Arial, I'm going to extend this out. I'm going to make it Arial bold, and I'm going to change its text height to 3/8. It's going to be ginormous. There we go. Now the one last thing that I want to do with these is I'm going to highlight both of them. I can come over here to properties and highlight properties again. Now because these values are different, paper text height, it says varies. The style, it says varies. I can force these back to what they were. I don't want to do that. I want to do something different. I want to come down here to justify. Now if you notice, the justification, the insertion point, excuse me, is the upper left corner of these pieces of text. M-text just does that. M-text always justifies, the default justification is the top left. A single line piece of text, its default justification is always the bottom left. It's just the way it is. It's how they made it in the program. So I just want to make these pieces of these M-text entities have the same justification as the other. So I'm going to change this down to bottom left. And you wouldn't be able to see it as much on my system because my system speed probably isn't all that fast. But as you mouse, as you hover over the different options available, if I hover over these different options, you will see, there we go, you'll see these justification points changing. I want to use bottom left. So I'm done with that, push return, or hit escape rather. Now I'm going to move these into place using the same move command and the same tracking methods that we used in the other drawing. So M for move, I'm going to select this object, push return. Now you notice again my mouse is over that imaginary boundary, so if I move it right smack on top of the text, I don't see that insertion point. So there's my imaginary boundary, there's my insertion point. I'm going to move my mouse around so I'm hovering over the insertion, just like that, so I can get my tracking. Type 5:30 seconds. Is that right? That's right. Push return. Come down to this end of that line. Hover over that endpoint. Move my mouse up. Type 3:30-second. Return. There we go. It's right perfectly in place where I wanted it. We're just going to repeat the process on this big piece of text. M for move. Select the object. Push return. Come down here to where the insertion point is, hover over it for a second so I get my object tracking, type in 5:30 seconds, push return, come down to that endpoint, hover over it, and you saw how fast that went. It just grabbed that endpoint and started the object tracking right as I moused over it in a split second. And even though it says endpoint 3:30 seconds. So if I left click now, it would be kind of close. I'm going to type it in just to make absolutely sure. 3:30 seconds. And yes, the text is bleeding over the edges here. It's normal. This is fine. This is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Now, if it matters to you, you can select your text object, right click. I can come here and say draw order, and I'm going to send it to the back. If that matters to you. Now, what I need to do is I need to fill out this information. So we don't want the date 4 times. So I'm going to double click on this text. Come on. There it goes. Project description. I want this in all caps. Apartment project. Push return. Move on to the next one. Obviously that's you. Type in your name. I don't need your name there. And then this one is going to be me. There we go. And that was a right click in the middle of the text. For whatever reason that showed up, my finger slipped. Again, I'm not overly thrilled with this mouse right now. Alright, so we're done with all this text down over here in the bottom. Next video, we're going to put the text in the middle. We're going to add a reference image here at the top. And we're almost done with this, guys. Almost done. So stick with us. See you in the next one. I'm going to save it just to make sure. And we're saved. There we go. We'll see you in the next video.